On a cold autumn morning in the small town of Brookville, a police officer and his canine partner stood frozen beside a rusted warehouse door. The dog's nose pressed against the metal, growling low, a sound that sliced through the still air like a warning. Officer Daniels looked down at the little girl standing a few steps behind him. Her small hand trembled. Her wide brown eyes didn't blink. Her name was Amara Johnson, 9 years old. And just moments earlier, she had done something no one in Brookville would ever forget. She had raised her hand and given a silent signal to a police dog. At first, the officer thought she was playing, a curious child copying what she'd seen months ago during a school visit. But when he saw the fear in her eyes, he knew it wasn't a game. He knelt down and whispered, "Show me." Amara pointed toward the abandoned warehouse. Her tiny voice never made a sound, but her eyes told the story her mouth couldn't. The dog barked once, sharply, then pulled forward, leading the way. Within moments, Officer Daniels called for backup. What they found behind that door would shake the entire town to its core. But to understand how a 9-year-old girl ended up guiding a police officer to a crime scene, you have to go back to where it all began. To the small apartment above the corner grocery store, where Amara lived with her mother, Denise Johnson, a nurse's aide who worked long hours, but always left a note on the counter that said, "Be good, my sunshine." Amara wasn't like other kids. She didn't talk much, didn't run around or make noise. She watched. She listened. She noticed things other people didn't. Her mother used to smile and say, "That girl's got old eyes. She sees what people try to hide." And in a town where nothing ever seemed to happen, that gift, or maybe that curse, was about to uncover something darker than anyone could imagine. That afternoon, Amara walked home from school, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, the beads in her braids clicking softly with every step. As she passed the old warehouse near the edge of town, she saw something that made her stop. A black van. 2 men unloading large bags into the back door. One of them noticed her. He looked up and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Amara looked away and hurried off, her heart pounding louder than her footsteps. That was the moment everything began. But what happened next would change Brookville forever. The next morning, the sun rose soft and gold over Brookville. Children hurried to school. Cars hummed along Maple Street. And life, on the surface, looked ordinary. But for Amara Johnson, the world never stopped whispering its secrets. She walked quietly beside her mother, Denise, who clutched a steaming cup of coffee, her eyes tired from another overnight shift at the clinic. "Mom," Amara asked softly, "do bad people look like good ones sometimes?" Denise slowed her step. "Why do you ask that, baby?" Amara shrugged. "No reason." But Denise could tell there was more behind those wide brown eyes. She brushed her daughter's cheek and smiled. "People aren't always what they seem. That's why you stay kind, and stay smart." Amara nodded. She always listened, even when she didn't understand everything. When school ended that day, she walked her usual route home. Past the playground, past the corner store where Mr. Patel always waved and handed her a peppermint, and finally past the porch of Miss Loretta. Miss Loretta sat wrapped in a knitted shawl, her swollen fingers resting on a chipped teacup. "Well, if it ain't my little sunshine," she said with a smile. "Come give old Loretta a hug." Amara dropped her backpack and did just that. She never stayed long, just enough to check if Miss Loretta had eaten, and to bring her mail from the box at the end of the path. Most kids ran home to watch cartoons. But Amara? She stayed to listen. Miss Loretta talked about her garden that once bloomed with lilies, about her late husband who couldn't cook to save his life, and about how sometimes the world forgot the quiet people. Amara loved those talks. They made her feel safe, like the world still had gentle corners. That evening, as Denise prepared for her night shift, she kissed Amara's forehead. "Lock the door after Miss Loretta leaves, okay? And don't open it for anyone else." "Yes, Mama," Amara whispered. When her mother left, the apartment felt too big, too quiet. The refrigerator hummed like a low song. Amara curled on the couch, flipping through her sketchbook. On one page, She had drawn Rex, the police dog from school. His ears alert, his eyes sharp. She remembered how Officer Daniels had shown the kids a few hand signals. How to stay still, how to call for help without saying a word. It had fascinated her. He'd even winked at her after class and said, "You've got quick eyes, kiddo. I can tell you pay attention." Now, weeks later, those same signals lingered in her mind like a secret language. Outside, wind rattled the window. Down the street, a van door slammed. Then another. Amara froze. She crept to the window and peered through the curtain. That same black van. Parked near the warehouse again. Her heart thudded softly in her chest. She wanted to call her mother. But Mama was at work. Miss Loretta's lights were off. So Amara sat back, hugged her knees, and whispered to herself, "It's okay, they'll go away." But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Something about those men. And those bags. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every creak in the building made her jump. Every passing car light looked like the van's headlights returning. And yet, amid that fear, a spark of courage quietly began to grow inside her. Because sometimes, even the smallest hearts can feel when danger is near. And Amara Johnson was starting to understand that she might be the only one who could stop it. But what happened next would test that courage in ways she could never imagine. The next day began like any other. Gray clouds stretched over Brookville, and the smell of rain drifted through the air. Amara sat in class, doodling in the corner of her notebook. She wasn't drawing flowers or stars like the other kids. She was sketching the van. The one with the dented side and the tinted windows. Her teacher's voice blurred into the background. All she could think about were those men. And the way one of them had smiled when he saw her. When the bell rang, she packed her bag slowly, waiting until the hallway cleared. Outside, puddles formed on the sidewalk, and she tightened her coat as the drizzle began to fall. Halfway home, she saw Officer Daniels standing near the park with his dog Rex. He was talking to another officer. But Rex was watching her. The dog's eyes met hers, alert and kind. For a moment, Amara hesitated. Then she remembered the signals. Her small hand lifted, trembling slightly. She made the twisting motion. The silent sign that meant danger. Officer Daniels frowned, confused. He had taught that signal to the kids months ago, never thinking any of them would actually use it. He took a step toward her. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said gently. "You okay?" Amara didn't speak. She just pointed down the street, toward the warehouse. Daniels followed her gaze. Rex's ears perked up instantly, nose twitching in the wind. "Show me," Daniels said softly. Amara turned and began walking, her small boots splashing through shallow puddles. She stopped at the corner, where the chain-link fence around the warehouse stood half open. "Back there," she whispered finally, her voice barely audible. Daniels motioned to Rex, and the dog lunged forward, pulling against his leash. He was growling now, low and certain. "Dispatch," Daniels spoke into his radio. "This is Officer Daniels, K9 Unit. Possible illegal activity at the old factory site on Birch Street. Requesting immediate backup." Static crackled in response. "Copy that, Daniels. Backup en route." The closer they got, the stronger Rex pulled. Then, a sound. A muffled cry. From behind the rusted door. Daniels froze. His hand went to his holster. He glanced back at Amara. Her face pale, her eyes wide but steady. He whispered, "Stay here." With one push, the door creaked open. The stench of oil and damp concrete filled the air. Rex barked once, loud and fierce. Inside, shadows moved. Daniels stepped forward, gun drawn. "Police. Show your hands." Silence. Then, a figure darted through the dark. Another followed. A crash. Footsteps. Rex bolted inside. And moments later, the sound of shouting and barking echoed through the warehouse. Amara stood outside, shaking. The rain beginning to fall harder. Then, voices. Crying. Soft, scared voices. Daniels emerged with 3 people. A woman, a teenage boy, and a little girl. Their faces pale, their wrists bruised. But alive. Amara's breath caught. She couldn't move. Daniels knelt beside her. His voice trembling. "Kid, you just saved their lives." But the warehouse still held more secrets. And what they would uncover next would reveal a darkness deeper than anyone in Brookville could have imagined. Because this wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of an investigation that would expose something much, much bigger. That night, Brookville was no longer the same. Police cars filled the narrow streets near the old warehouse. Red and blue lights flickered against the rain-soaked windows, and the entire town seemed to hold its breath. Inside the cordoned-off area, officers moved like shadows, carrying out boxes, logging evidence, and taking statements. Officer Daniels stood near his patrol car, his uniform drenched, his face hard with disbelief. He'd seen bad things before, but this was different. Behind that warehouse door, they had found more than missing people. They'd uncovered an entire trafficking operation, a network that stretched beyond their small town. And at the center of it all, a familiar name kept surfacing. A businessman. Respected. Untouchable. Someone who owned property all over Brookville, including that warehouse. Harold Crane. The same man who sponsored the town's Christmas parade every year. The same man who shook hands with the mayor and donated to the police fund. As the news spread, the town was in shock. Whispers filled coffee shops, church pews, and grocery aisles. How could this happen here? How could no one have known? But through it all, one name kept returning. Amara Johnson. The little girl who had given the silent signal. Reporters wanted interviews. Cameras flashed outside the clinic where Denise worked. And soon, people began talking about things they didn't understand. Some said it was luck. Others said it was staged. A setup by the police for publicity. Denise heard it all. She tried to shield her daughter from the noise. But lies spread faster than truth. One evening, as they walked home from the store, a woman passing by muttered, "Poor thing. Probably coached." Denise stopped in her tracks. "Excuse me," she said sharply. The woman shrugged. "You know how these things go. People love a hero story." Denise's jaw clenched. She looked down at Amara, who clutched her hand tighter. When they got home, Amara whispered, "Did I do something wrong, Mama?" Denise knelt down, tears welling in her eyes. "No, baby. You did something brave. Don't you ever forget that." But in another part of town, Officer Daniels was facing his own storm. His report had named Harold Crane as the property owner. And suddenly, his superiors were calling for discretion. For further review. For silence. He was told to drop the lead. But Daniels couldn't. Something in his gut screamed that this went deeper. Late that night, he sat in his car outside the Johnsons' apartment building, watching the lights flicker in their window. He thought about that little girl. The one who'd seen what grown men had ignored. The one who'd risked everything by speaking without a word. And he made a decision. He wasn't going to let this disappear. The next morning, he called a friend in the state task force. Someone who didn't answer to local politics. He sent the files, the photos, the statements. Within days, the case exploded beyond Brookville's control. Federal agents rolled in. Warrants were issued. And Harold Crane's empire began to crack. But power doesn't crumble quietly. That evening, Daniels received a warning on his windshield. A folded note with 5 words. "Stay out of this." For her. He looked up toward the apartment window where Amara's light glowed softly. A chill ran down his spine. Because now, it wasn't just about justice. It was about protection. The same courage that had saved lives was now putting another life in danger. And soon, Amara Johnson, the quiet girl who had seen too much, would find herself at the center of a storm she never asked for. But what happened next would test not only her bravery, but the very soul of Brookville itself. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Brookville had never felt this quiet, this unsure. Police cruisers still passed through the neighborhood. Reporters had stopped coming. But whispers lingered, like dust that refused to settle. Denise Johnson tried to keep life normal for her daughter. Breakfast at 7. Homework at the kitchen table. Prayers before bed. But even in the routine, there was fear. Every time a car slowed outside their apartment, Denise's heart skipped. Every time Amara's school called, she braced herself. Because somewhere out there, the people tied to that warehouse, the people Amara had unknowingly exposed, were still watching. One afternoon, Officer Daniels knocked on their door. His eyes were tired, his voice low. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "we've received some threats. They're vague, but I think it's best if you two stay somewhere safe for a while." Denise frowned. "Safe? You mean leave our home?" Daniels nodded. "Just until this blows over. The feds are making progress, but it stirred a lot of dangerous people." Amara stood silently by the doorframe, holding her stuffed rabbit, the one with the missing ear. She looked up at Daniels and whispered, "Did I make them mad?" The officer knelt down, meeting her eyes. "You made them scared, kiddo. Scared of the truth." Those words stayed with her. That night, Denise packed a small bag. They were moved quietly to a safe house outside town. A cabin near the edge of the woods, guarded by plainclothes officers. The silence there was different. No honking cars. No neighbors laughing through thin walls. Just wind through the trees and the sound of their own breathing. At first, Amara was restless. She missed school. Missed Miss Loretta. Missed feeling normal. But Daniels visited often, bringing small things to keep her spirits up. A sketchbook, colored pencils. Even a photo of Rex with a paw print signed, "Your friend always." He became more than a police officer to her. He became the first grown-up, outside her mother, who truly believed in her. During one of his visits, Amara asked, "Why do people hurt others, even when they know it's wrong?" Daniels took a long breath. "Sometimes people chase money or power until they forget what it means to be human. And sometimes, it takes someone small to remind them." Amara tilted her head. "Someone small." He smiled. "Yeah, someone like you." Those words lit a spark inside her. She started drawing again. Pictures of Rex, of her mother, of the people she helped save. Her drawings told a story. And when Daniel saw them, he asked, "Can I show these to the station?" Amara hesitated, then nodded. Days later, one of her sketches appeared on the news. A simple image of a police dog leading people out of darkness. Underneath it, the headline read, "The Silent Hero of Brookville." The town's heart began to shift. The same people who had doubted her now left flowers at the police station. Messages of support filled the Johnsons' mailbox. Miss Loretta even recorded a message for her. "You did good, baby girl. You made the whole town remember what courage looks like." But even as hope returned, danger was still close. One night, as rain tapped against the cabin windows, Denise woke to the sound of tires crunching on gravel. Headlights flashed through the trees. She grabbed Amara and whispered, "Stay behind me." Outside, a shadow moved. Then a voice calm commanding, "Daniels, open up. It's me." Relief washed over her. It was Officer Daniels. But his face told a story of its own. "They arrested Crane," he said. "But it's not over. He's naming names. And the people he worked with, they're scared. Desperate." Denise's eyes filled with fear. "What do we do now?" Daniels looked out into the dark woods and whispered, "We wait. And we stay strong." Amara, listening from behind the couch, clutched her rabbit tight. She was scared, but also stronger than she'd ever been. Because heroes aren't always fearless. Sometimes, they're just brave enough to keep standing, when the world tries to make them small. And soon, this little girl's courage would bring justice to an entire town. The storm that night was relentless. Thunder cracked above the trees, and rain poured down in thick, heavy sheets. Inside the cabin, Denise sat by the window, her hands gripping a mug of untouched tea. Amara slept on the couch, Rex's photo clutched in her small hand. Then, headlights flashed through the rain. A car, moving fast. Too fast. Denise stood, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Moments later. A knock. Hard. Urgent. Police. Open up. It was Officer Daniel's voice, or at least, it sounded like him. Denise hesitated. Something felt wrong. She peeked through the curtain. Two silhouettes stood outside, rain streaming off their coats. One of them was too tall. Too still. She backed away. "Amara," she whispered. "Baby, wake up." The door rattled under another knock. "Ma'am, open up. It's Daniels." But before she could move, another car pulled into the drive, sirens off, lights flashing red against the trees. The real Officer Daniels stepped out, gun drawn. Brookville PD. Step away from the door. Chaos erupted. The first two men turned. One shouted, the other reached into his coat. Gunfire tore through the rain. Screams. Glass shattered. Denise pulled Amara to the floor, shielding her with her body. Then, silence. Only the sound of rain and Amara's trembling breaths. When Daniels finally entered, his uniform soaked and his voice shaking, he said softly, "It's over." The two intruders were taken down. One dead. One in custody. And that man, the one still alive, was the missing link. The piece of the puzzle that tied Harold Crane's operation to a network far larger than anyone had imagined. Within days, the federal task force moved in. Dozens arrested. Properties seized. And the truth, the ugly, tangled truth, came pouring into daylight. Harold Crane's smiling face, once framed on every city wall, now appeared across the news, handcuffed, head down. The courtroom was packed when his trial began. Reporters. Families. And in the front row, Amara and her mother. She wore her Sunday dress. Her braids tied neatly with blue beads. She looked so small in that big room. And yet, she carried the quiet power of someone who had changed everything. When Officer Daniels took the stand, his voice was steady. He told the story of a little girl who noticed what no one else did, who raised her hand and gave a silent signal, not out of fear, but out of courage. Then the prosecutor said, "Without her, none of this would have come to light." The jury turned to look at Amara. And for the first time, she didn't look away. She met their gaze. Calm, brave, unblinking. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in applause. Daniels exhaled for the first time in months. Denise held her daughter close, whispering through tears, "You did it, baby. You did it." Outside the courthouse, the press waited. But Daniels stepped in front of the cameras and said, "This wasn't the work of the police alone. It was the courage of one little girl who remembered a simple lesson. When you see something wrong, you don't look away." That clip would go viral within hours. Millions would see her face, the girl who didn't speak much, but whose silence saved lives. And from that day forward, Brookville was no longer just another small town. It became the place where one act of courage, one small signal, sparked justice across an entire state. Amara Johnson, the quiet little girl with old eyes, had reminded the world that even the smallest voice can change everything. Months passed. Winter came softly to Brookville, blanketing the streets in quiet white. The world had changed. But somehow, life found its way back to gentle routines. Evelyn's Bakery reopened on Main Street. The church bells rang again on Sundays. And the people of Brookville walked with a little more awareness, a little more kindness. For the Johnsons, peace came slowly. Denise returned to work at the clinic, this time with fewer night shifts, and a heart filled with gratitude instead of fear. Their small apartment above the grocery store had been repaired and repainted. Fresh curtains, new locks, and sunlight streaming through the kitchen window every morning. And Amara. She was different now. Still quiet. Still thoughtful. But stronger. Like a tiny flame that had learned how to stand against the wind. Every morning before school, She stopped by Miss Loretta's porch again. They shared tea, laughter, and sometimes silence. The kind of silence that felt full instead of empty. Officer Daniels visited often, usually with Rex trotting proudly by his side. One afternoon, he handed Amara a small wooden plaque. On it were the words, "For extraordinary courage and bravery in the face of danger. Amara Johnson, the silent hero of Brookville." Amara looked at the plaque, then up at him. "Do I have to keep it?" she asked shyly. Daniels smiled. "Why wouldn't you?" She shrugged. "I think it belongs to everybody who helped." He chuckled softly. "Maybe you're right. But promise me you'll keep it a little while." She nodded, hugging it close. That night, she placed it by her window, next to her sketchbook, and a photo of Rex. The moonlight touched the gold letters, and for the first time in a long time, Amara felt safe. In the weeks that followed, her story spread beyond the town, shared in schools, on television, and across the internet, not as a tale of tragedy, but as a reminder that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it signals. Sometimes it lives inside a child's heart that refuses to look away. And somewhere in Brookville, when the wind passed through the streets at night, it carried a quiet message, a promise that light will always find its way through darkness, no matter how small. Because in the end, kindness is not weakness, and courage isn't about size or strength. It's about choosing to act when no one else does. Amara Johnson didn't save lives because she was fearless. She saved them because she cared enough to try. And that's the kind of bravery the world will never forget. So the next time you see something that doesn't feel right, remember her. Remember the little girl who raised her hand and changed everything. Because sometimes, the smallest act of courage can expose the darkest truth. What about you? Would you have done the same in her place?